It was one of those nights where sleep refused to come. Emma sat cross-legged on her worn-out couch, staring at the glow of her laptop screen. Her tiny studio apartment felt suffocating, its walls closing in with every passing minute. Deadlines loomed over her like storm clouds, and her editor's emails had grown sharper, more impatient. Inspiration? That elusive spark she needed to write something truly gripping. It seemed miles away. Emma sighed and leaned back against the couch cushion. She opened a browser tab and started aimlessly scrolling through Craigslist. Normally, it was just a place for people to sell old furniture or post job listings. But tonight, something caught her eye, a classified ad that stopped her cold. For sale, antique mirror, perfect condition. Minor imperfections may exist but are part of its charm. Serious inquiries only. The photo attached to the listing showed an ornate, gilded mirror leaning casually against a cracked plaster wall. Its frame looked ancient, swirling with intricate carvings of vines and flowers. But what really drew Emma in was the reflection itself, or rather, how strange it appeared. The surface shimmered unnaturally, almost as though it were alive, reflecting light from some unseen source. Beneath the picture, there was a note written in bold letters. "Do not stare too long." Emma frowned. What kind of person sold a mirror with such a cryptic warning? And why would anyone need to warn buyers about staring into a reflective surface? Still, curiosity tugged at her. As someone who wrote stories for a living, she couldn't help but feel intrigued. Maybe this was the inspiration she'd been searching. For all along, as she scrolled further down the page, 2 other listings popped up that sent chills down her spine. One read, "For sale, haunted dollhouse, fully furnished. Whispers at night, only serious collectors." The accompanying photo showed a small, intricately designed dollhouse sitting on a wooden table. Inside, tiny figurines stood frozen mid-action. A father reading a newspaper, a mother cooking dinner, children playing with toys. Everything seemed perfectly normal, except for the faint shadow hovering near the windows, barely visible in the background. The third listing made her heart race. Even faster, available now, vintage typewriter. Writes messages by itself. Great for collectors interested in paranormal phenomena. The image showed a sleek black typewriter resting on a desk, surrounded by stacks of blank paper. There was no explanation beyond the vague description, but the idea of a machine writing on its own sounded both fascinating and terrifying. Emma bit her lip, debating whether she should ignore these ads and move on. After all, they could easily be hoaxes, people trying to sell junk under the guise of mystery. But something about them felt different, like they weren't just random objects. They were alive, waiting for someone to find them. Against her better judgment, she decided to reach out to each seller, pretending to be a collector interested in unique items. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she typed. Her first message, "Hi, I'm very interested in your antique mirror. Can we arrange a meeting?" She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then, without hesitation, she contacted the other 2 sellers as well. Within minutes, responses poured in one after another, quick and eager, inviting her to their homes to see the objects firsthand. Each reply carried an air of urgency, as if the sellers had been waiting for someone like her to show up. Emma glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Most people would have thought twice about visiting strangers' houses at this hour, especially based on Craigslist ads. But Emma wasn't most people. She thrived on adventure, always chasing the next big story or thrilling experience. Besides, she told herself, nothing bad ever happened in real life. These were just ordinary objects being sold by ordinary people, right? Little did she know, this decision would lead her straight into 3 horrifying tales that would change her life forever, or possibly end it. The next morning, Emma woke up feeling uneasy. Her dreams had been filled with distorted reflections, whispering voices, and clacking typewriter keys. She shook off the lingering dread and reminded herself that today was just research, a chance to gather material for her next article. Nothing more. She scribbled down the addresses provided by the sellers and packed a small notebook and pen into her bag. Before leaving, she took one last look at the Craigslist listings. Something about them still didn't sit right with her, but she pushed the thought aside. Adventure called, and she couldn't ignore it. Her first stop was a dilapidated Victorian house deep in the woods. The drive there was eerie enough, the narrow dirt road winding endlessly between towering trees, branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. When she finally arrived, the house loomed before her like a monster, its windows dark and uninviting. An elderly woman answered the door, her face lined with wrinkles and her smile tight, almost forced. "Are you here for the Mira?" Mrs. Hargrove asked, stepping aside to let Emma in. Her voice was soft but carried an undertone of unease. Emma nodded, following her upstairs to the attic. The air grew colder with each step, and when they reached the top, she saw it, the mirror, propped against a dusty trunk. It gleamed despite the dim lighting, its surface rippling faintly as though alive. Mrs. Hargrove repeated her earlier warning, "Don't stare too long," but Emma couldn't resist. She stepped closer, peering into the glass. At first, everything seemed normal. She saw her reflection staring back at her, pale and wide-eyed. Then slowly it changed. Her reflection smiled a cruel, twisted grin that didn't belong to her. And then it spoke. "You shouldn't have come," it hissed, its lips moving independently of hers. Emma stumbled backward, her breath catching in her throat. She turned to flee, but not before hearing one final chilling whisper, "You'll see me again." By the time she reached her car, her hands trembled so badly she could barely grip the steering wheel. Whatever she had seen in that mirror wasn't human, and yet it knew her. It watched her. And worst of all, it wasn't done with her yet. Emma drove away from the house, her mind racing. Was it possible that the mirror was cursed? Or was she losing her grip on reality? Either way, she still had 2 more stops to make, and she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever awaited her next would be far worse than anything she'd already encountered. Emma's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she drove away from the Victorian house. Her mind replayed the horrifying moment in the attic, the mirror, her distorted reflection, and those cold, menacing words, "You'll see me again." She tried to convince herself it was a trick of the light, a figment of her imagination, but deep down, she knew better. Something unnatural had happened back there, something that defied logic. Still, curiosity burned inside her like a fire she couldn't extinguish. If anything, the encounter only fueled her determination to uncover the truth about these strange Craigslist listings. With a shaky breath, she glanced at the next address scribbled on her notepad. It was time to face the second seller, the suburban neighborhood seemed almost 2 perfect rows of identical houses with manicured lawns and white picket fences. Emma pulled up to a modest 2-story home where a nervous-looking young man stood waiting outside. His name was Marcus, and he introduced himself with a hesitant smile. "Thanks for coming," he said, leading her inside. "I've been trying to get rid of this thing for weeks." He gestured toward the living room, where the dollhouse sat on a wooden table near the window. Up close, it was even more intricate than it had appeared in the photo. Tiny furniture filled its miniature rooms, and figurines posed as if frozen in everyday life. A mother cooking, a father reading, children playing. Everything looked charming, until Emma noticed the faint shadow lurking near one of the upstairs windows. "What do you mean by whispers?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper herself. Marcus hesitated, glancing around as though afraid someone or something might overhear. "At first, I thought I was imagining it," he admitted. "But then I started hearing my name late at night, clear as day, coming from the dollhouse." Emma frowned. "Your name?" He nodded. "Yeah, and sometimes other things, like crying or footsteps." One morning, I woke up and found the dolls moved. They weren't where I left them. She leaned closer to inspect the dollhouse, her skepticism warring with unease. At first, everything seemed still and silent. Then faintly she heard it, a soft murmur, almost imperceptible. Leaning in further, she strained to make out the words. "Help us," the voice pleaded. "Louder now," Emma jerked back, her pulse racing. Before she could react, one of the tiny dolls turned its head and locked eyes with her. Its painted-on smile twisted into a grotesque sneer, and its glassy eyes gleamed with malice. "What the hell is this?" she gasped, stumbling backward. Marcus grabbed her arm. "That's why I'm getting rid of it. Please take it. Just get it out of here." Emma didn't need to be told twice. Grabbing the dollhouse, she bolted out of the house, leaving Marcus standing pale-faced in the doorway. As she drove away, she swore she could hear faint whispers emanating from the passenger seat. Her final stop took her to a dimly lit basement apartment downtown. The building smelled of damp concrete and mildew, and the hallway lights flickered ominously as she made her way to the unit. A gaunt man answered the door, his hollow eyes studying her intently. "You're here for the typewriter?" he rasped, stepping aside without waiting for a response. Inside, the apartment was sparse and cluttered, with stacks of old books and papers scattered everywhere. In the center of the room sat the vintage typewriter, a sleek black machine resting on a rickety desk. Emma approached cautiously, running, her fingers over its keys. They felt cold, unnaturally so, as if they'd been sitting in ice. "It writes on its own," the man said cryptically. "Sometimes it doesn't stop." Emma raised an eyebrow. "What does it write?" He shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "Things you don't want to read." Against her better judgment, she pressed one of the keys experimentally. To her shock, letters appeared instantly, but not ones she'd typed. The machine clattered noisily, spitting out line after line of frantic text. "Why did you come? They're watching you. Leave while you can." Panic surged through her veins. She yanked her hand away, but the typewriter kept going, faster and louder, filling page after page with ominous warnings. One sentence stood out among the chaos. "You opened the door. Now they're coming for you." The man watched silently, his expression unreadable. When Emma finally managed to tear herself away, she snatched the typewriter off the desk and fled the apartment, her heart pounding in her chest. As she reached her car, she realized the machine was still typing furiously, its relentless clacking echoing in her ears, the weight of the objects by the time Emma returned to her apartment. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. She placed the mirror, dollhouse, and typewriter on her coffee table, staring at them warily. Each object radiated an unsettling energy, as if carrying fragments of whatever dark forces had touched them. The mirror hung crookedly on her wall, its surface shimmering despite the lack of light. Every time she passed it, her reflection mimicked her movements. But now, it began doing things she hadn't, opening doors, turning off lights, smiling wider and wider until her face split open in a grotesque grin. The dollhouse sat innocuously on the table, but its whispers grew louder each night. One evening, Emma woke to find the entire thing vibrating violently, the dolls inside clawing at the glass windows as if trying to escape or reach her. And the typewriter? It typed incessantly, filling reams of paper with cryptic messages and gruesome predictions. One line chilled her to the bone. "They're coming for you." Desperate for answers, Emma returned to Craigslist, hoping to track down the sellers. But their profiles had vanished, replaced by new ads selling other cursed relics. Worse still, she noticed familiar usernames lurking in the comment section of unrelated posts, users who seemed to know exactly what she'd been through. They taunted her, mocked her, warned her. In the end, Emma disappeared. Neighbors found her apartment empty except for three things: the mirror, the dollhouse, and the typewriter. All bore fresh scratches and scorch marks, as if someone or something had fought fiercely to destroy them. But they remained intact, waiting patiently for their next victim. And somewhere online, a new Craigslist ad popped up. Free box of mysterious antiques. Must take all. Serious inquiries only. Would you dare click? Emma's life spiraled out of control the moment she brought those cursed objects into her apartment. At first, she tried to convince herself it was all in her head, just stress or exhaustion playing tricks on her. But as the days turned into nights, the eerie events grew impossible to ignore. Each object seemed alive, pulsing with a malevolent energy that seeped into every corner of her tiny studio. It wasn't long before Emma realized she had made a terrible mistake. The mirror's grip. Tightens the mirror dominated her living space, its presence overwhelming despite its size. Emma couldn't bring herself to remove it from the wall. Something about it felt permanent, as if it belonged there now. Every time she walked past, her reflection taunted her. Sometimes, it mimicked her actions but exaggerated them, smiling wider, moving faster, laughing louder. Other times it acted independently, doing things she hadn't, opening doors behind her, turning off lights when no one else was home. One night, unable to sleep, Emma sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the mirror. She told herself she was just observing, trying to understand what was happening. But the longer she looked, the more distorted her reflection became. Her face stretched unnaturally, her features melting like wax. Then, her reflection stepped forward, not toward the glass, but out of it. Emma screamed and scrambled backward, tripping over her own feet. When she looked up again, the figure was gone, but the room felt colder, heavier. From that point on, she avoided the mirror at all costs, covering it with a sheet whenever she could muster the courage to approach it. Yet even covered, it whispered to her in the dead of night, calling her name in a voice that sounded eerily familiar yet completely alien. If the mirror haunted her dreams, the dollhouse consumed her waking hours. Its whispers grew louder each day, echoing through the apartment like a chorus of lost souls. At first, they were faint murmurs, pleas for help, cries of pain, but soon they became demands. Angry voices accused her of abandoning them, of leaving them trapped inside their tiny prison. Late one evening, Emma woke to the sound of scratching. Heart pounding, she crept into the living room and found the dollhouse vibrating violently on the coffee table. The tiny figures inside clawed at the windows, their painted faces twisted in rage. One of the dolls, a little girl in a yellow dress, pressed her face against the glass, her mouth opening impossibly wide as she screamed silently, terrified. Emma grabbed a hammer from her kitchen drawer and swung it at the dollhouse. The wood splintered under the blow, but instead of destroying it, the damage only worsened the chaos. The dolls began moving faster, their limbs jerking unnaturally as they climbed over the wreckage. The air around her grew thick with static. Electricity and a low guttural growl emanated from within the ruins. Backing away, Emma dropped the hammer and fled to her bedroom, slamming the door shut behind her. Through the crack beneath the door, she saw shadows creeping across the floor, tiny, malformed shapes dragging themselves toward her sanctuary. That night, she didn't dare close her eyes. Of all the objects, the typewriter was perhaps the most relentless. It typed constantly, filling page after page with cryptic messages and dire warnings. Some were personal, addressing Emma by name and recounting details of her life that no one else should have known. Others spoke of broader horrors of forces beyond comprehension, of entities watching and waiting for their chance to strike. One morning, Emma woke to find the typewriter sitting on her bedside table, though she was certain she'd left it in the living room. A fresh sheet of paper lay beneath its keys, bearing a single sentence typed in bold, jagged letters: "You can't run anymore." Panic gripped her chest as she realized the truth. These objects weren't isolated curses. They were connected pieces of a larger puzzle, or worse, tools used by something far darker. Whatever force had bound them together wanted her specifically, and it wasn't going to let her go. Desperate for answers, Emma returned to Craigslist, hoping to find some trace of the original sellers. But their profiles were gone, replaced by new ads offering other cursed relics. In the comments section of unrelated posts, she noticed usernames she recognized, the same ones who had sold her the mirror, the dollhouse, and the typewriter. Their messages mocked her plight, urging her to embrace the gift she'd been given. Her paranoia reached its peak when she discovered strange symbols carved into the walls of her apartment. At first, they appeared near the objects, but soon, they spread throughout the space on the ceiling, the floor, even the inside of her closet. The symbols glowed faintly in the dark, pulsing in rhythm with an unseen heartbeat. Emma stopped eating, stopped sleeping. She barricaded herself in her bedroom, clutching a knife for protection as the sounds outside grew louder. The mirrors, whispers, the dollhouse's screams, the typewriter's clacking all merged into a deafening cacophony that drowned out her thoughts. She begged for mercy, for release, but none came. On the seventh night, the noises ceased abruptly. For the first time in days, silence filled the apartment. Hesitant but hopeful, Emma emerged from her hiding place. The living room was empty save for the three objects, which now sat perfectly still on the coffee table. Even the symbols on the walls had vanished. Relief washed over her until she heard a knock at the door. Her heart sank as she approached, it knowing deep down who or what waited on the other side. Slowly, she turned the handle and opened the door. Standing there was her reflection from the mirror, fully formed and grinning wickedly. Behind it stood the dolls from the dollhouse, their bodies grotesquely enlarged, their eyes glowing red. And in their midst loomed the gaunt seller of the typewriter, holding the cursed machine in his hands. "Time to join us," he said, his voice cold and hollow. Before Emma could scream, the world dissolved into darkness. Neighbors eventually broke into Emma's apartment after days of hearing strange noises. What they found chilled them to the bone. The mirror, the dollhouse, and the typewriter remained untouched, surrounded by scorch marks and claw-like scratches. There was no sign of Emma. In the weeks that followed, a new Craigslist ad appeared. Online, free, box of mysterious antiques, must take all. Serious inquiries only. Beneath the listing, a comment caught the attention of curious browsers. "Don't trust the seller. They're not human, but curiosity is a powerful thing." Somewhere, someone clicked contact seller, and the cycle began anew. The end.